All right. Cool. So I want to talk about the CrossFit Open and getting back into exercise in the new year and have this video available for all the members and everybody who's interested basically as soon as they want to check it out. So I think the first thing to talk about is getting back into working out after a holiday break because it is so terribly intimidating. It can be quite a bit. Like it can be something that is very daunting to people. And the first thing to talk about is making it seem really easy, like making it seem as if it's something that you can do every single day. And for a lot of people, that could be walking, doing core work, doing basic calisthenics that you can even do at home. One of the things we like to talk about would be from Atomic Habits, make it something you can start in under 2 minutes. So if you can start it and even maybe complete it in under 2 minutes, then there's no real fear of failure. Or if you're like, I'm going to do 2 minutes of sit-ups, I'm going to do 2 minutes of air squats, there's not really a big barrier to entry. There's no reason to think that you couldn't do it that day. The 2 minute rule is very helpful too for bad habits. I know as we kind of wrap up a holiday time of year, right? You don't want to keep eating chocolate. You don't want to keep drinking every day. You basically want to have the opportunity to set yourself up for success. That could mean moving foods that are trouble or moving foods that you're not necessarily going to want to have for your goals out of the way, or making them not visible. Like having them directly on the counter is often a really bad idea, and having them on your table so you can grab them. We often have people say that their kids really like a food, or they have something along those lines, or somebody in their family or household is always snacking on something that they also have trouble with, right? Like your weakness is chocolate and it's visible, right? If you put it up on a shelf or if you put it down low somewhere that you can't see, so that you have to like move other things out of the way to access, say it's chocolate, or maybe for others it's alcohol, right? It could be any sort of vice food that you know is not supporting your goals. Just make it so it's hard to get to. What we like to do, Heather and I, is we don't keep those things in the house. So if I really want something, then it's a whole project. Like you have to get up, you have to get in the car. It's winter, so you probably wait for the car to warm up, and then you go for a drive to grab something. 9 times out of 10, that doesn't happen because it's borderline ridiculous to get in a vehicle and drive somewhere to grab like, I don't even know, chocolate milk or like a candy bar. It seems so crazy. Even if you feel like you have a really strong craving for it, if the process takes more than 2 minutes, you don't have to, or you're less likely to get up and go do that thing. So making things easy to start, pack your gym bag the night before, right? Have your gym bag near your car keys, pack your food the night before. One of my habits that corresponds with times I've been most successful is making food on Sundays and then having at least Monday and Tuesday pretty much set up, so I don't have to worry about making that, especially proteins, takes a long time to cook. So if I can cook like chicken or steak in at least a pound, I know that I'll be good for Monday, Tuesday. Maybe make like some vegetables and some rice and put that in another container in the fridge. You'll know that you have like 2 to 4 meals that are all set to go. You don't have to worry about the excuse of, oh, I don't have anything at home. And I find that Sundays are often the best day for that. Let's see. The other thing people are asking, what can I do to build a home gym? And that's a very popular question, especially with some uncertainty from people. So it's like, there's different tiers, right? When I think about how to build a home gym, I don't think, all right, you have to do it this one way, or you have to do X. Like you don't have to own any specific piece of equipment. I like to think of it as like, how much of a monetary investment are you starting with? So for most people, the very first thing you want to do is make a space, right? So if you have a room that is safe to work out in, even that can be a monetary investment, like getting matting on the floor or getting even a yoga mat, or maybe you have to pay someone to set the space up so that it's insulated, or you have to get a heater or whatever. And especially for those of us it's January right now. So if you're watching this anytime right around it being recorded, it's probably pretty cold in a garage or a basement. So maybe the first step is finding a space that you actually want to hang out in. And maybe you have to get something that makes it appropriate. Once you have built that habit of going into that separate area or whatever it is, like facing the other way in your living room, and that's the way that you face when you do your sit-ups or whatever, then it's time to think, okay, what can you actually purchase? Like what equipment makes sense? Again, money is resources in general are a concern. So you want to buy something that isn't going to be a regret. I know many people have Concept 2 machines. They're fantastic. They're also dramatically overpriced clothing racks. Like a $1,000 rower is an awesome rower. It's not a good price for like a place to hang your sweatshirt or whatever. Like you want to have something that you're actually going to use. Also, if it's space efficient, so you don't have any issue like moving it around. I personally have probably, too many things for a relatively small space at home, like having a piece of cardio equipment and having weights for whatever that room is. It's like 120 square feet. Might have been a bad idea, but it's something that's important to me. So I just like reorganize it and deal with the consequences every single time. If it gets done and you're using it, that's all that matters. I hear way too many people have rowers and don't know what to do with them because they like rowing in the gym. So my first recommendation is probably a kettlebell or a dumbbell. And I tell people, if you're going to get one, make it light to moderate. If you're like, I can spend $100, a couple $100, then maybe you get a good pair of adjustable dumbbells, or maybe you get one lightweight and one heavyweight. And then the lightweight you can use for all your bodybuilding stuff. You can use the heavyweight for more of like a strength focus. And if it's not heavy enough, then you just add a tempo, right? So you can just go a little bit slower. You can go with more of a explosive concentric if you're trying to build strength for that light-ish weight. And having one or two weights is kind of that first tier. I like to say it's like the under $200, under $300 tier. After that, then it's like, okay, you have the basics. You realistically have everything you need if you have one or two weights and you have a room or a space that you can use. Then after that, you start going after like, okay, what makes the most sense? What can I bring with me if I move? What can I build upon, right? So then people will get squat racks, or people will buy their first barbell. So once you have a lightweight and a heavyweight, and again, a space that's safe, you're going to probably want something that you can build off of. So if you can get a barbell, right? Buy yourself an empty barbell, then you have another weight. You can start practicing barbell specific movements. Again, as long as you have the space. They also make short barbells that are like 2 or 2.5 feet smaller, and they can be very similar weights to your normal barbells. So if you're somebody who's really into the CrossFit Open, like there's going to be barbells. I wouldn't necessarily suggest an empty barbell to somebody who's into powerlifting, but if you're going to be doing CrossFit stuff or you're brand new to weightlifting, then yeah, an empty barbell totally works. It's also something that you can build on in the future. Maybe every couple months you buy yourself a pair of plates to add to it, or you buy yourself a squat rack in the near future. Those things also, there's a big difference between like commercial grade or commercial use on a squat rack and then like at home. If you can get a squat rack at home that can hold 500 or 600 pounds, you're probably fine. When people have facilities, they are more likely to buy a squat rack that's rated to 1,000 pounds or 1,500 pounds. So it's just a liability thing. You can spend a lot less money, get a decent rack, or even get a rack that adjusts or moves around in the space to save you some space. They have fantastic wall-mounted racks. I believe like every major company, Rogue, Rep Fitness, PRX, all those guys make a rack that literally can push up to the wall, only takes about 6 inches of space. And of course, this is maybe a second or a third tier of spending. You're no longer spending like $200 or $300. Maybe you're spending $1,000 or $1,500 on this setup. And then after that, like after you have been there, or if that's something that you've already done, then you're kind of in like the gung-ho, like, what do I actually want? It's no longer necessities. Like you are getting full workouts, right? You probably have a couple weights. You probably have a place to do like pull-ups or calisthenics if you want that kind of stuff. Like you can easily have all of those things for under $1,000, including shipping. It's when you want to have like hundreds of pounds of weight, or if you want to have multiple cardio machines, or if you want to, I don't know, have multiple barbells, have specialty barbells. That's the kind of like, you're basically building a full gym. Like it's, people say home gym. Again, I try to break it into those tiers. When you are way over $1,000, then at that point, I mean, you're spending whatever money you want. You're buying whatever you actually want. It's no longer things you feel like you need. And that place, it's not something that I typically advise people on. It's just like whatever you want to get. And if you have the space, just do it and just use whatever you want. Having a space at home is also really helpful for getting back in the habit. It is hard for a lot of people to make progress. Like it's hard to really, really push yourself, or it's hard to feel comfortable getting under like the heaviest weights or going as fast as you've ever gone. Like typically people won't set personal records at home, but in the grand scheme of things, 90% of all workouts are not that way. Like they're going to be things that you do to simply make yourself more likely to do that in the future. So if you can even do them, or if you have concerns about things like COVID, like you're at home, you don't have to worry about that. You can still get your workouts in. Like we have plenty of people who follow an online program for various reasons, and get yourself set up to do that, especially with the way that the companies are now. Like everything's online, and you can get all this stuff literally off of Amazon if you want. Not that I would recommend a lot of that stuff. It's much lower quality, but it's totally doable. The other big question was like how to do the CrossFit Open and how to do it well. Speaking of which, Dan is doing some prep. So he's, of course, making music and throwing things. But to do the Open, the big thing is actually doing the movements you're going to be tested on. And the Open historically is about a dozen movements. They're very, very easy to look up. I would try to list them, but to not embarrass myself for people future watching, instead of like missing one or two at the end, I'll just say, look it up, because again, it's a very common thing. Plenty of people have lists of like, what is the CrossFit Open? Like what movements are there? But the ones to look out for are often the barbell movements, if you haven't done them, and then the kipping gymnastics. You want to also pair them in the ways they most often are paired. So like, yeah, if you're doing thrusters, that's great. Like you're probably going to have to do them, but you want to pair thrusters with pull-ups. You want to pair them with chest to bars. You want to pair them with bar muscle ups, because that happens. Like they do that all the time. So doing pairings of those things, and most Open movements or most exercises will not exceed about 120 reps in the Open. And I would say it's as low as like 45 reps. It kind of depends on your skill level. It also depends on just the year. So if you know that you can do about, say, 60 to 100 reps quickly of any of those 12 movements, outside of double unders, of course, you're in a good spot. Like if you can get reps per minute above 15, 18, or 20 for a lot of those things, then you're in a really, really good place for the Open, especially with the way it's set up now for the top 10%. And I know that's kind of an oversimplification. So if I like to like pick an example, if you were to do a 5-minute test of toes to bar, and you know you can do 15 every single minute or 18 in every single minute, like you're in a good spot. And reps per minute is a very helpful way of breaking down a skill, especially if you do consecutive minutes. What we see, and something that's trouble, especially when coaching people who want to be proficient in like compete in CrossFit, is like, oh yeah, I can do all the things. Like having the skills is great. Like it's a very necessary first step, but you have to be able to do the skills at a fast enough rate over and over. And then of course, mixing them with other things. So if you can do those 15 toes to the bar on average per minute for 5 minutes, like that's a good start. But now it's like, can you still do that? And what are like, they mix cleans in a lot with toes to bar. So if you can do squat cleans and toes to bar, that's even better, because now you're breathing under a loaded pattern, and then you're breathing on the toes to bar too. Just having those things in rotation. Look up old Open workouts. They're all on the website for CrossFit.com. Like they're all under the Open category. I think it might be labeled sport. Just go to old years. You'll notice very obvious patterns, or there's plenty of resources like this where people talk about common pairing. So toes to bar and cleans, toes to bar, cleans and double unders, thrusters and double unders, thrusters and burpees, thrusters and pull-ups. Those are super, super common. Row wall ball, super, super common. You'll see those things basically every year. They like to do deadlift, handstand, push-up. They've also done variations of deadlift box jump or deadlift handstand walk. So they like to pair heavy-ish or moderate deadlifts with inversions. And if you don't do those things, then it's hard. Like it's hard to brace yourself for a deadlift and then go upside down, especially to perform a skill. Again, like if you can do 60 reps with the open weight, like the open weight for deadlift tends to be 225, 155. If you can do that in 5 minutes or so, like you're in a fine spot. That's more than enough. The trouble I honestly think with the open is before the branding or the marketing from CrossFit was that the open is for everybody. Like they want to get 500,000 people to do it. And I understand it's $20 a person. It's a pretty easy calculation to see why they would want to have 500,000 people pay them $20. It's not like it's extra work if they have 500,000 versus 400,000, especially if they're only really caring about, say, the top 10% or less. It's easy money for them. And I think it is a good way as a measuring stick for people. I always say it's a competition. If you're willing to put yourself through that stress, you should do it. Like I'm not saying people shouldn't do it. They offer scaled versions, but don't do it thinking like you're going to RX every workout if you haven't put in the time, or don't do it thinking it's like purely happy-go-lucky and fun, because it can get a little intense. Like it's a competition. I mean, you can play board games with people and it can get intense. Like anytime there's points on the line, people get a little into it. So if you go into the open, just know that, yeah, it is competition. Some people will take it super serious. You can make it whatever you want, but commit to it, do it more than one time, because that's the real value. You can do it this year, then do it next year and see how you compare to hundreds of thousands of people. And you can even pick up the progress that you've seen. Like, yes, if you have the same programming from the same coaches and you have the same class that you go to every single week, like, yeah, there's a reason you're comfortable in that setting. It's nice to have programming, or it's nice to have a different set of tests. It's also fun to have a season. Like as an adult, if you played sports as a kid, you had, like you had your soccer season, you had your basketball season, and then it ended. And it's nice to have, especially now that it's shorter, 3 weeks where you can be like, yeah, like I'm going to take this seriously. Like I'm going to focus on all my outside of the gym stuff. I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to like whatever. I'm going to be prepared for my gym sessions. It also makes this after the holiday time so much easier to transition into, because you're like, I can't skip the gym even if it's 4 degrees out. Like I'm going to do the open. And you have that public accountability. Like you know that other people are going to see you doing the open. You have like the live leaderboard. You have friends in other places, right? It's kind of cool in the sense that it's public accountability. That's also the same reason why it can be stressful for some. The other thing is the RX division now is not like it used to be, in the sense that most people could probably participate in the RX division a few years ago. Like any person who'd been doing CrossFit for about a year or so could probably like pull it off. Not that it would be a great workout for them, but they could theoretically participate. It's not necessarily like that anymore. They've made things a bit harder. Like there's much more of a skill gap. There's much more of a difference, especially post open when we move into like quarterfinals. I understand that they make it top 10%, but 10% is variable to the number of individuals. So if there's 20,000 people, I mean, there are thousands of people who couldn't even participate in one of the workouts last year in the quarterfinals because they made the snatch weight like more than some people's 1 rep max. And again, that's the second tier, but there's still tens of thousands of people qualifying for that. Like we have people who are only a couple years in that still qualify for that. And it's still very much a sport. And as you move into these higher tiers, like things become much, much heavier or much, much higher skill very, very quickly. And keeping that in mind can be helpful so you don't have a big mental stress, especially associating it with something that a lot of people have positive emotions about. It's a great measuring stick, and comparing yourself to others is only helpful when you look at it from a macro view, right? If you compare yourself to 300,000 people, it's helpful. But if you start comparing yourself to your peers or anything like that and you never had before, it's not very helpful unless you plan on actually being a full-blown athlete in this space. So that's kind of my soapbox rant about the Open. The other thing for this time of year is it's about to be as dark and as cold as it gets. So making sure that your habits and your priorities are set, like knowing what time of day you're going to work out, what days of the week, and then sticking to them to the best that you possibly can without, causing other stressors. Like it shouldn't create more stress to do your workout. Like it should be something that is just part of your day. And if you make it part of your day and you have a stoic attitude going into it, then it's not that big of a deal. Like you're just going to do the workout because you know it's important. You know that it's part of your set of goals. If you start making it like make or break, like, oh, if you don't go Monday, I won't go Tuesday or Wednesday. Like that's a ridiculous thing to do. You have every day is unique. And if something goes crazy on Monday, like you get a flat tire and you literally don't make it to the gym, as long as it gets fixed, or you can still go Tuesday, Wednesday, there's no reason to completely abandon your priority or whatever you oversleep. Like you still should stick to the plan. You should still do your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You should still do your Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever your routine is. Having that routine and establishing it is so valuable, especially, again, we just got out of the holidays. People weren't at home, like you're on vacation or you're just not going to work. Getting back into the routine in a low stress way is super valuable. I also tell people, make your goals just barely ahead of where you currently are, not just barely ahead of where the best they've ever been is, right? So if you want to hit a new PR on a strength lift, know where you are now, aim to increase that by like 5 or 10 pounds. Don't aim to increase it by more than you've ever done in your entire life. Right? The goal is not to say, I'm where I am at now. Like you might not even know. So you have to measure where you currently are, which is again, why the Open can be helpful for people. You actually know where you are. And the goal is to just be any better than you used to be or than you are currently, rather than the best you've ever been. So say like 20 years ago, somebody ran a 6-minute mile and then they're like, yeah, I'm going to start running again. Like I haven't been running for years. If you have the expectation that you're like, I run a 6-minute mile, or you have the, I guess, misconceived notion that that's what you do, that you're going to have a really hard time when you're running paces that are several minutes higher always, because it's not where you are currently. Then having the idea that slow incremental progress from that your current place is really the only way to go. You'll also be consistently rewarded and you'll feel happy that you're making progress towards your goal because you have realistic targets, you have realistic percentages to work off of. Everything actually makes sense rather than putting the stress on yourself that is, oh, I used to be so amazing. I used to do this and this. Like, this is where I thought I was at. Like, don't beat yourself up. I try to tell people your PRs lifetime are cool, but in terms of training, it only really matters what you've done in the past, like 30, 60 days, because that's the only thing that's going to directly apply to your training today or tomorrow. And making habits that are sustainable. Don't do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, because that's what your favorite CrossFit Games athlete does on Instagram. Do the days or do whatever makes sense for you, and try to have a plan that, again, it makes sense. It's consistent, but it's not a stressor. You want to make these things as low resistance as possible and also make them a little bit fun so that you're able to do that. Like, as humans, we really like to see progress. We really like to have a reason to keep going. And if you can make that progress incremental, it makes a huge difference. So aim for a 5-pound PR, aim for a 1-second PR, and give yourself time to get back into it, especially if you did take the past week or two. Focus on process-oriented goals of, I want to go to the gym 3 times this week. I want to make sure I get 8 hours of sleep, like whatever, 5 times or more this week, because those things ultimately make a much bigger difference. And I know it's a time of year where people will like make new goals or people will commit to habits. And one of the more potent things I've ever thought in this realm or have, like, of course, borrowed from someone else is intensity is the opposite of duration. So if you come to the gym 25 times in January, I basically already know that you're not coming 25 times in February. Or if you are, like, that's awesome. But people who go from like 0, or they go from like 3 times a month in November and December, and then in January come like 20 times, make me very nervous, because it's not a super sustainable pattern. And honestly, it's not typically worth it to that person, because you hype yourself up and think, oh, cool, like I just did all this work. I just paid this money to be part of a gym. Like, I worked out 20 times and like I don't look the way I want to look. And it's like, yeah, because you put a ton of work in for 1 month. What if you did even, I mean, it's not hard to spread that out. What if you had done 8 sessions that month, but you did 8 sessions every month for the whole year? Because then next thing you know, instead of, say, you do 20 in January, 20 in February, then you do like 6 in March, and then, like 6 or 8 after that in April, and then you completely give up. What if you did 8 every single month and you did 96 sessions for the year? Like, that's obviously a much more potent stimulus. And the same thing applies to people's goals. Like, you don't have to, if you're somebody who already works out and you have a very specific goal, you don't have to work on it 20 times this month. You can work on it 4 times. You can work on it 6 times this month. And if you consistently work on that thing you've either never been able to do, or the thing that you've always wanted to improve, then if you do it a couple times a week, rather than like, oh, every day I work out, I'm going to work on pull-ups, or like every day I work out, I'm going to work on squats, like, it's not going to last. Those things, those are great trendy things, but they don't last. Like, they don't work for people. Typically it's exciting and it's cool to do like a squat everyday program or pull up everyday program. But you hear about the people who make it through and have great success. You don't typically hear about the people who do those things and then develop an injury, or you don't hear about those people who do it and like get tendonitis or something like that. You hear about the individual who's like, yeah, I PR'd by 10%. Like, it's not the way it always works. The thing about fitness, as sort of a conclusion here, that is why it's so hard to sell to people, is it's like consistent, moderate effort for weeks, months, and years that makes a difference. And that doesn't change when we start a new calendar. Like, yeah, it's going to feel like a monumental effort some days, but the best fitness programs for health and the best fitness programs, honestly, even for sport, have a level of consistency that you can apply for long durations. Of course, if someone's trying to peak for an event and they're going to like pay their bills, they're going to work harder than a sustainable amount because they're trying to win. But if you're not trying to do that, then your goal is make fitness as sustainable as possible. To people who most adults are like, oh yeah, that person's in great shape. Like, that person that they associate with being in great shape for years on end is typically the person who, they wake up before their day starts and they go for a run, or they wake up before their day starts and they have like a 20 or 30-minute routine that they do basically every day. Like, and on paper, it might not seem daunting. It might not seem very impressive, but say the routine is, okay, 30 minutes, first 10 minutes, walk on the treadmill, next 10 minutes, like as many alternating sets of pull-ups, push-ups, and sit-ups as I can. And then last 10 minutes of whatever, they do some like curls and squats and stuff. It doesn't matter what the exercises are, but the point is they have a routine that they can do every single day. They can even kind of like turn their brain off and do. Like, how many people run the exact same run every single morning, or they go one way most days and they turn around and run the other way on the other days? Like, that consistency, that person who's incredibly consistent is typically the person who everyone views as like their fit friend. It's not as often the person who, gets super into CrossFit, gets super into powerlifting for like a year and a half is considered the fit friend. That person is typically the crazy friend, Of course, we didn't get a lot of questions. I know this is the very first time that we did it, but I'll make the video available to the people in the Discord to have questions about. I know it's a half hour of soapbox time, so it can be a lot to get through. But if you have questions, just let us know. And thanks for checking it out.